The Old Man and His Grandson. Once upon a time, there was a very old man. His eyes couldn't see very well, his ears couldn't hear very well, and his knees shook when he tried to walk. When he sat at the table, he could hardly hold the spoon. He spilled the soup on the tablecloth, and sometimes it ran down his chin. The son and his wife did not like this.
"Can't you be more careful?"
The wife said. So they made the old grandfather sit and eat in the corner behind the stove. They gave him just a little food in an earthenware bowl. The old man used to look sadly at the table, and his eyes would fill with tears. One day, his shaking hands could not hold the bowl, and it fell down and broke. The young woman scolded him.
"Can't you be more careful?"
He said nothing, but looked even sadder. So, for a few pennies, they bought him a wooden bowl for him to eat from. One day, they were all sitting around inside. The little grandson of 4 years old began to gather some pieces of wood on the floor. "What are you doing, son?" asked his father.
"I am making a little trough for you and Mother to eat out of when I am big,"
the grandson said. The son and his wife looked at each other. They felt very ashamed of themselves and started to cry. "We are so sorry, Father," the son said. From then on, they took the old grandfather to the table and let him eat with them. Even if he spilled a little food, they did not say anything. The Goose Girl. Once upon a time, there was a princess named Annie. Annie loved to ride in the fields upon her horse, Falada. Falada could talk, so Annie and Falada would speak together. One day, Annie's father, the king, fell off his horse while he was out riding and died. The queen had only her daughter now. Soon, it became time for Annie to go to the next country to marry the prince who lived there. The queen gave Annie a handkerchief and said,
"Keep this handkerchief with you at all times. It will protect you against all evil."
"Thank you, Mother,"
said Annie. The queen bid her goodbye, and Annie and her maid set out. Annie rode her special horse, Falada, and the maid rode a pony. In time, they came to a brook, and the princess wanted a drink of water.
"I am thirsty. Please bring me some water,"
Annie asked her maid. The maid was rude and refused the princess's demand.
"No, I will not. If you are thirsty, get down yourself and go down to the water. I will not be your maid anymore,"
the maid replied. The princess was so thirsty that she got down off her horse, knelt over the brook, and drank water. As she did so, the handkerchief fell into the water and drifted away. The maid saw it and knew that the princess was no longer protected. The maid insisted that she ride Falada, and the princess would ride the pony. She made the princess wear her maid's clothes, and she wore the princess's royal clothes.
Aha! Now you will do what I say. Give me your horse to ride, and you will have my pony. Give me your clothes to wear, and you will have mine,
the maid said. Then the maid threatened.
Do not tell anyone what has happened.
Annie had to promise. They entered the neighboring kingdom and were greeted with great joy by the prince. The prince married the maid, and the real princess was sent to work with a goose boy. The maid was afraid that the horse Falada might tell someone the truth, so she talked to the prince.
Kill Falada, the horse. He caused a lot of trouble on the way.
Annie heard that Falada would be killed. She begged the goose boy, who had been ordered to kill Falada, to find a way to save it. The goose boy took pity on Annie, so he agreed. He brought Falada to a barn. Every day, Annie passed by to visit and talk to Falada. The goose boy was often nearby and heard their story. One day, the goose boy told the king everything he'd heard them say. The king realized that Annie was the real princess. The maid was sentenced to death for her lies and treachery. Then the real princess, Annie, became the prince's wife, and they lived happily ever after. The Selfish Giant. Once there was a beautiful garden. The garden was filled with fruit trees and many kinds of beautiful flowers. Children from the village loved to play in the garden. As soon as school was out for the day, they always came to play there. A big old castle sat at the back of the garden. According to legend, a giant once lived there, but he had been gone for a very long time. The giant had been gone so long that no one expected to see him again. One day, the children in the garden heard loud thumping sounds. The thumping was so loud that it shook the earth.
What could that be?
The children asked each other. Then they looked up and saw the giant. The giant was very angry.
How dare you children play in my garden?
The giant yelled.
Go away and do not come back again.
The giant put up signs telling everyone to stay away. Then he built a tall stone wall around his garden.
That should keep those children out? Ha 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 ha!
The giant laughed to himself. Then he went inside to sleep. The plants in the garden were not happy that the giant had returned. The trees and flowers enjoyed the company of the children from the village, but the children were no longer around. The warm sunbeams also decided to leave the giant's garden. Because the giant chased the children out, winter came quickly to his garden. No plants grew, and the weather was cold all the time. When spring and summer came to the village, it did not come to the giant's garden. The giant went back to bed and slept some more. One day, the giant woke up to the sound of a chirping bird. He looked out the window and saw that spring had returned to the garden. Then he discovered that the children found a way into the garden through a gap in the stone wall. The giant now saw the error of his ways and decided to take down the wall. But when he opened the castle door, the children ran away. The giant then saw a boy who was trying to climb a tree. The giant bent over and gently helped the boy climb up onto the branch. He sat down and said,
"It is your garden now. I am truly sorry for chasing you away."
The giant then went to work, knocking down the big stone wall. The children all came to play in the garden, and spring returned. For many years, the giant lived in the castle, and he happily played with all the children from the village that came to visit.
Master of all masters. Once there was a girl who wanted to get a job. She went to a job fair to apply for a position as a servant. At last, an old gentleman hired her and led her to his house. The man lived alone in an isolated house. He believed his knowledge was so great that he always called things by complex names. On the first day of work, the man taught his new servant all these unusual names. He said to her,
"The first thing you need to know is, what will you call me?"
Master, Mister, or whatever you please, sir.
The servant answered,
"You must call me Master of all Masters,"
said the man. He pointed to his bed and asked,
"And what would you call this?"
A bed or couch or whatever you please, sir.
She answered,
"No, that's my barnacle." "What about these?"
he said, pointing to his pantaloons.
Breeches or trousers or whatever you please, sir.
She answered,
"You must call them squibs and crackers."
the master said.
"And what would you call her?"
asked he, pointing to his cat.
Cat or kitty or whatever you please, sir.
She answered,
"You must call her White-Faced Simony. Now this."
the master gestured to the fire.
"What would you call it?"
Fire or flame or whatever you please, sir.
She answered,
"You must call it Hot Cockalorum." "And what about this?"
the master went on, pointing to the water.
Water or wet or whatever you please, sir.
She answered,
"No, Pondalorum is its name." "And what do you call this?"
the master asked, pointing to the house.
house or cottage or whatever you please, sir,"
she answered.
No, you must call it High Topper Mountain,
replied the master. The servant listened and carefully wrote down everything her master said. Unluckily, that night, a fire suddenly broke out. The servant woke her master in a fright and cried,
"Master of all masters, get out of your barnacle and put on your squids and crackers. For white-faced Simony has got a spark of hot cockalorum on its tail. And unless you get some pondalorum, High Topper Mountain will be all on hot cockalorum."
Because these names were so long and complex, it took the servant a while to finish what she was saying. But the fire spread so quickly that by then it was too late. The master and servant only escaped death by inches and had to watch their house burn to the ground. What a shame! If only the man had not complicated matters, he and the servant could have stopped the fire and saved the house.
The Magic Spring. Once upon a time, there lived an old man and his wife. They wanted a baby very much. They both prayed to God every day and asked God to give them a child. One day, while taking a walk over a mountain, the old man met a rabbit. The rabbit was hurt and bleeding.
Oh, what happened to you?
The old man asked the rabbit. A hunter has tried to kill me, and he's still after me, the rabbit answered. Could you please help me hide? The old man agreed. He opened his bag and hid the rabbit inside. Soon, the hunter appeared and asked about the rabbit. The old man kept his promise.
He went that way.
He told the hunter. Then he pointed to a distant hill. I want to thank you for helping me, the rabbit said. Then the rabbit led the old man to a magic spring. The water in the spring could heal any wounds. It also made people younger. The old man told his wife and everyone in the village about the magic spring. They all drank the water. Soon they became young again. A greedy man heard the story. He went to the spring and drank as much water as he could. He wanted to be the youngest-looking man in the village. The greedy man drank and drank until he turned into a child. He drank even more water from the magic spring and turned into a baby. the childless couple walked past the magic spring. They saw the baby who was once the greedy man. "Our prayers have been answered," the wife said. "God has given us a baby." They brought the baby home and raised him as their own. The couple and the baby lived happily ever after. The Ugly Duckling. A mother duck lived on a farm by a quiet pond. She had a nest made of straw. Every day, the mother duck hoped her eggs would hatch. When the ducklings finally came through the shells, the mother duck had a big surprise. 4 of her ducklings had beautiful yellow feathers, but 1 duckling had gray feathers. He looked nothing at all like the others. The mother duck loved this unusual duckling as much as her other children, but his brothers and sisters constantly teased him. "You're such an ugly duckling!" They all laughed. The ugly duckling wanted to play with the other ducklings, but every time he tried to join in the fun, they chased him away. "Why are they all so much prettier than me?" the ugly duckling thought. "Don't we all come from the same family?" Finally, the poor little duckling could stand no more of their bullying. He thought, "No one here likes me. I can't live here any longer." The duckling left the pond and went into the woods. He found a small cottage where an old woman lived at the edge of the forest with a hen and a cat. "Oh my, where did you come from?" the old woman asked the duckling. "If you don't have a home, you can live here with me." The old woman really liked the duckling. She made sure he had enough food to eat. But when she wasn't watching, her hen and cat chased him away. "Where can I go to be happy?" the duckling cried. "Everywhere I go, I am teased and chased." Winter was coming. Snow fell from the sky, and the icy wind whipped through the trees. It was so cold that the poor duckling almost froze. One day, a farmer saw the ugly duckling.
"You look like you could use a place to stay,"
the farmer said. The duckling happily followed the farmer home. But the farmer had children, and they loved to tease and chase him. Soon, the duckling left the farm. He traveled a few miles and spent the winter in a nearby marsh. There were other birds in the marsh, but none looked like the ugly duckling. Eventually, spring arrived. One day, the ugly duckling saw a group of swans swimming on the pond. The swans were so beautiful and graceful that he had to swim closer to watch them. "Will the swans tease and chase me too?" the ugly duckling wondered. But the swans did not chase and tease him. Instead, they welcomed him as one of their own. Then the ugly duckling looked at his reflection in the water. To his surprise, the ugly duckling discovered that he was now a beautiful swan.
The Little Red Hen. Once, there was a quiet farm where a little red hen lived with two friends, a duck and a goose. One day, the little red hen found a grain of wheat in the farmyard. She asked her friends,
"Would anyone like to help me plant this wheat?"
The goose laughed and said,
"Who would bother to plant grain on a beautiful day like this?"
"Not me,"
the duck replied.
"All I plan to do today is swim in the pond."
So the little red hen planted the grain of wheat all by herself. Summer came. The wheat grew healthy and strong. It produced many stalks of wheat, which soaked up the sunlight and waved in the wind. When the wheat was ripe, the little red hen asked her friends,
"Who will help me bring the wheat to the mill?"
The duck and the goose heard the little red hen, but they just kept splashing in the pond.
"Can't you see we're busy?"
the goose said, laughing with the duck. So the little red hen got a wheelbarrow and took the wheat to the mill all by herself. When it was time to make bread with the flour, the little red hen didn't bother to ask for help. She did the work all by herself. She mixed the flour and other ingredients in a big mixing bowl. Then she put the bread dough in a pan and set it on the oven to rise. As the bread baked, its fresh smell spread throughout the farm. The duck and the goose were the first to notice that wonderful aroma. They quickly realized that it came from the little red hen's window. They came standing outside the window, thinking the little red hen would invite them to come inside and eat. But the little red hen said,
"Go away. I will eat the bread alone, because I am the only one that has worked for it."
Then the little red hen called her chicks to come inside, and they all had a wonderful feast. There was nothing left for the two lazy friends. The duck and the goose have learnt a lesson, that there would be no gains without pain.
The Happy Prince. Once there was a prince who never saw sadness or misery. His royal family decided to shelter him from such things, so he would always be happy. Everyone called him the Happy Prince.
After the prince died, the royal family built a large statue of him and put it in the public square. The statue of the prince was covered with gold, and his eyes were made from costly sapphires. The royal family and townspeople didn't know the prince's spirit had not gone to heaven, but stayed in his statue. In the town where the statue of the happy prince stood, many people were poor. They suffered from lack of food, heat, and medicine. The cold winter weather always made their suffering worse. The happy prince saw all and felt so sad for them, but he could not do anything. One day, a swallow that was separated from its flock saw the statue of the prince. The swallow decided to sleep by the statue until morning. Then it would continue on its journey to Egypt. As the swallow slept, he felt water splashing on his back.
What's that?
The swallow thought.
Is it raining?
Then the swallow realized that the happy prince's statue was crying.
What's wrong?
The swallow asked.
Everything.
The happy prince moaned.
Here in the center of town, I see so much suffering every day, yet I am stuck here and can do nothing to help.
The swallow thought for a moment and said,
I am in a hurry to fly to Egypt and join my flock, but I will do my best to help.
That night, the happy prince asked the swallow to take the ruby from his sword to help a child who needed food and medicine. The next day, the prince asked the swallow to take something of value from his statue and help poor people. As time went by, he asked the swallow to take the sapphires from his eyes and the gold covering his body to give to the poor. Soon, the weather became frigid. It was so cold that the swallow died at the prince's statue's feet. When the prince realized the swallow was dead, his heart was broken. The statue was no longer beautiful, so the townspeople decided to take it down and melt it in a furnace. The prince's broken heart and the dead swallow were thrown into a dust heap. All the good things that the prince and the swallow had done for the town deeply touched God, so he decided to take the prince and the swallow to heaven. And they lived happily ever after.
The New Year's Baby by Isa Martel. Jessie watched the snow fall outside of her window and counted each flake. She felt like every day she was counting and waiting, counting how many days until the new year and waiting until her brother got here. There were 5 more days until the New Year's Day. Jessie's parents bought things for her new baby brother. There was a new soft blanket and a pair of warm, lovely onesies.
When will Josh be here, Dad?
Jessie asked Dad.
Soon, sweetie,
Dad said. The next day, Jessie's parents got lots of food and sparklers. Jessie wanted to see the sparklers crackle and glow.
Not yet,
Mom said.
You must wait for the 1st of January to arrive.
When will it be the 1st of January, Mom?
Jessie asked.
4 more days, my dear,
Mom said. The next day, there was still 3 more days until New Year. Mom was knitting baby booties.
I want to make a gift too. When will Josh be here?
Jessie asked.
any day now.
Mom answered. On the last day of the year, Jessie was ready to make her brother a gift. Dad brought her paper, scissors, and glitter.
When can I give it to him?
She asked.
As soon as he's here.
Dad answered. On New Year's Eve, Jessie's family sat down to enjoy the last meal of the year. Suddenly, Mom left the table in surprise, Dad following behind. When he returned, he announced,
"Let's go to the hospital."
It was time for the baby to be born. In the hospital, Jessie was so nervous that she could not sit down. She was worried for Mom and her baby brother as well. She watched the clock. It got closer to the new year. It was 5 minutes until midnight. Jessie wondered if Josh would be born this year or the next. Jessie looked at the clock. 4 more minutes until midnight. Only 1 minute had passed, but Jessie felt like she had waited forever. Jessie took from her pocket the present she had made for her brother. It was a glittering snowflake. She hoped he would like it. At 3 minutes until midnight, Jessie wondered what her new baby brother would be like. She wanted him to be healthy and happy. She also wanted him to like her. Jessie looked at the clock. 2 minutes. Then 1 minute. The new year was coming closer and closer, and her brother was still not here yet. Jessie hoped everything was fine with Mom and her baby brother. Jessie heard the sound of fireworks exploding. New Year is coming. Just then, Dad came out of the door announcing,
"Jessie, Josh is here!"
The whole family went to Mom's bedside. Jessie hugged her brother for the first time.
For you, Josh. Happy New Year. From now on, we'll spend every year together.
The Pine Tree. Once, in a forest, grew a little pine tree. He felt quite lonely, as there were no other pine trees around. The pine tree had long, slender green needles. He liked to be the only green tree in the snowy winter time. But in the summer, he wanted to have big leaves like the other trees. One night, the pine tree thought,
I wish that I could have big leaves of gold.
When he woke in the morning, the wish had come true, and he had gold leaves. The pine tree was very happy to see his gold leaves sparkling in the sunlight.
How beautiful I am,
he thought.
How my leaves sparkle in the sun.
Soon a woodcutter came to the forest. He plucked all the gold leaves off and took them away. The pine tree was very sad. Then he wished to have leaves of glass so that no one could take them away. The next morning, the wish had come true, and the pine tree had leaves of glass. He was very happy to hear his glass leaves tinkling when the wind blew.
How beautiful I am now.
The pine tree thought,
how my leaves tinkle in the wind.
But in the afternoon, a big storm came. All the glass leaves shattered and fell to the ground. The pine tree was sad again and wished to have big green leaves. The next morning, the pine tree was very happy when it had come true.
Now I am like the other trees, with beautiful big green leaves,
he thought. But soon a goat came along and ate all the big green leaves. The pine tree cried and thought,
I wish I could just have my long green needles back again.
The next morning, he was very happy when he got the needles back.
Gold leaves, glass leaves, and big green leaves are all fine. However, long, slender green needles are good for a little pine tree like me,
thought the little tree. Since then, the pine tree lived happily with his needles every single day. He had learned a lesson that he should be happy with what he had, rather than demand things not suitable for him.
Thumbelina. A long time ago, there was a kind woman that wanted children. But she was not able to have a baby. She thought about how nice it would be to have a little girl, even a very tiny one. A fairy was listening and decided to grant her wish. She gave the lady a flower pot with a seed inside. Take good care of this little seed, the fairy said, and one day you will have a wonderful surprise. The lady watered the seed every day. Soon, the seed sprouted. She made sure it had enough sunlight. The plant grew healthy and strong. Then a bud appeared and became a tulip. When the tulip opened, there was a beautiful little girl inside. The baby was no larger than her thumb. I will name you Thumbelina, the kind woman said. The woman made Thumbelina a bed out of a walnut shell. She used a tulip petal as a blanket. As time went by, Thumbelina grew into a girl. Then she became a lady, but she did not grow very big. One day, an ugly toad came by. He saw Thumbelina and fell in love with her. When she was asleep one night, the toad kidnapped her. The toad took her to live with him on his lily pad in the pond. Please let me go, Thumbelina begged. I am so unhappy here. A swallow was sitting in a tree nearby. When the toad was away, she decided to help. Come with me, and I will take you to a better place, the swallow said. My home is warm and sunny. You are welcome to live in the loveliest flower in the garden. Thumbelina quickly agreed and jumped onto the swallow's back. They flew and flew through the sky. When they arrived in the swallow's home, Thumbelina saw how beautiful it was. The swallow introduced her to a handsome fairy that lived in the garden. He was small like her, and they soon fell in love. The fairy was a prince. He was the son of the Flower King. He asked Thumbelina to marry him, and they had a beautiful wedding. Thumbelina became queen of the Flower Kingdom, and they lived happily ever after. Tanabata, the Weaver Girl and the Cowherder. There once was a princess named Orihime. She was an excellent weaver. Her weaving loom was located by the Heavenly River, which is now also known as the Milky Way. The princess was so busy weaving that she would never have time to find a husband. I really wish I had time away from the loom, the princess sighed. But I have so much weaving to do and so many clothes to make. Orihime's father, God of the heavens, realized how lonely she was. So he decided to arrange Orihime to meet a cowherder, Hikoboshi, who lived on the other side of the Milky Way. I have never been around cows, Orihime told her father. We would have nothing in common, but because you asked, father, I will go and meet him.
You may or may not like him,
her father said.
But either way, it will be good for you to spend time away from the loom.
Orihime and Hikoboshi fell in love instantly and married. I never thought I would fall in love with a cowherder, but now I can think of nothing but you, Orihime said.
And I never thought I would fall in love with a princess,
Hikoboshi said.
But in marrying you, all my dreams have come true.
Their love for each other was so deep. Orihime lost all interest in weaving beautiful clothes, and Hikoboshi allowed his cows to wander all over the heavens. When Orihime's father saw what was happening, he became angry. Weaving needed to be done, and the cows simply could not be allowed to wander all over the heavens. So he ordered the lovers to part. "Please, let us stay together," Orihime pleaded with her father. "We love each other so much." Orihime's father thought for a while. Then he said,
"All right, Orihime, you and Hikoboshi can meet once a year on Tanabata on the 7th day of the 7th month. But you can only meet if you return to your weaving."
At last, the 7th day of the 7th month came. They found the heavenly river, now known as the Milky Way, was too difficult to cross because there was no bridge. Orihime cried and cried. A flock of magpies saw her sadness and decided to help. They flew to the river and made a bridge so Orihime could spend the day with Hikoboshi. It is said that if it rains on Tanabata, the magpies will not come. Therefore, until now, the Japanese always wish for good weather on Tanabata so that the Magpies Bridge can help the two lovers to be reunited.